The greatest threats to a state or any centralized power would be people capable of critical thinking, and then people that are unified, right? If they're unified, then you mentioned the numbers earlier, right? There's 8 billion of us and 30,000 of them, or whatever it may be. Like once the many are united, well, then they so vastly outnumber the few tyrants that it's not even a competition at that point.
And now the tyrants are largely incompetent buffoons.
Right. But the unification requires some critical thinking and orienting principle. So like, is this where, I don't know, is this why Bitcoin is such an existential necessity? Because like we need something to unify within or under. And Bitcoin's kind of like this national identity or international identity,
it's
something like that.
Well, let me say it differently. It's not ironic that those who have been so-called orange-pilled are not advocating for self-interest. They are advocating for a reconfiguration of the financial system and a reconfiguration, really a decentralization of oligarchy and government, because there's a direct correlation to happiness for humanity and freedom, right? These are seesaw equations. I think that's probably a better feature of the asset itself than the wealth creation that it has occurred in it already. And I think you have had a lot to do with, Sailor's had a lot to do with it, but also like for me, as soon as I was aware that it existed because of my historical background, I was like, poof, oh, sound money, done. And then this happening was so exciting because now it's official, it's the hardest money on the planet. It's the hardest money we've ever seen.
Right.
And
by a factor of 2.
Yep. And what an amazing benefit to be alive to bear witness to that. Because without it, you know, I love you like a brother, but we wouldn't even be able to be sitting here having this conversation.
No, of course.
You know, like, and that makes me sad.
Yeah.
But again, let's focus on the positives because this gives us an opt out.
Yeah.
And I would always advocate for nonviolence and just opting out and saying no. But you are correct that warrior mindset is the threat to them. And, you know, the samurais resisted getting taken over by the Huns and the Mongols, right? Multiple times. They were outnumbered, I think 30 or 40 to 1. Yeah. And then you are part Viking. I have Danish in me as well through the Irish lineage. And you know what the Norse believe, that you cannot enter Valhalla unless you die fighting, right? It doesn't have to mean the physical death.
Sure.
It can mean the philosophical or the spiritual, right? Where you can be reborn, right? And the born again Christian is a good modality to look at where we are now. We just want to have born again freedom maximalists, which doesn't harm anyone. Yeah.
I would say you're absolutely right. We need to unpack terms, right? When I invoke the term warrior, I don't mean someone that's going to war and fighting necessarily. Like it could be. But I would consider Gandhi a warrior, right? He was a warrior for human freedom.
Martin Luther King.
Christ, right? One of the greatest warriors for human freedom of all time. Because engaging in the spiritual war for enshrining a deep respect for life, liberty, property, right? And love for fellow humans, right? And, you know, I don't know. It's language always seems to be limiting in this way. Maybe we shouldn't use the term warrior. I'm actually, when I say the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death, I'm quoting someone. I don't know who it is. Maybe it's Sun Tzu or someone.
I think it is Sun Tzu.
But that when I invoke the term warrior, that's what I mean. I'm not advocating for violence. You know, it's like quite the opposite, actually. Like I think this is why Bitcoin's so amazing, that it is this bloodless revolution, right? There's opening lines to the song by the Police called "We Are Spirits."
That's from Samurai.
Musashi, one of my other favorite warrior philosophers. This is one of the, and now he's a real fucking warrior. He had 64 sword battles in his life, and he all to the death, and he lived to be the ripe old age of whatever when he wrote the Book of Five Rings. So yeah, that guy's a real warrior. But I don't think you have to be a killer to be a warrior per se. The lyrics I was about to cite from the song by the Police.
Don't stand so close to me.
It's the opening lines to We Are Spirits in a Material World. And it says, there is no political solution to our troubled evolution. Have no faith in Constitution. There is no bloody revolution. Right there. We're never going to fix this problem politically. Like we're not going, because politically, you're not going to fix the problem of private property rights. Why? Politically, again, we have to define terms. You're not going to fix private property rights by violating private property rights.
Well, you mean
it's not going to have we're not going to have a new state, a new system of inflation, taxation, regulation that's going to enshrine private property rights, because all of those things are a violation of private property rights. What we need is a technological solution that makes private property rights very difficult to violate in the first place, and then have political systems coalesce around that or atop that. And that's what I think us Bitcoiners are advocating for. Like,
that's where the collateral comes in.
Yeah.
It's not just the financial collateral. It's the philosophical, political, and spiritual collateral to do exactly what you just mentioned.
Right.
And I think what the phrase you were looking for is, we're not going to vote our way out of this.
No, of course not.
Right. So
Yeah.
how we have to do that, and Hayek even mentioned this in the Constitutional Liberty, we have to relitigate, relearn the great works of all time. Focus on the societal contract, focus on what makes men and women and children most free. And then you can then apply from there, because I am a, conservationist, right? Environmentalist is a political charge term, but a conservationist. You can then apply all of the concern for holistic environmental causes, right? And conserve and sustain all of your, you think what monocrop farming works when it's all owned by one? No, obviously it doesn't. Well, then how do you then upend that? Well, the beginning piece of that is end the central bank.
Yeah.
End the central bank. Small farming takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And my concern right here is those motherfuckers knew that, and that in the Great Depression, we had hundreds of thousands of small farms in this country, and people did not starve. Right now, we have that again. People are going to starve.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, the hour's late. The message is important, and seeing this sort of divide and conquer thing really, really get to another apex is just disturbing and disgusting. And I it's going to sound cheesy, but I want everybody to be kinder to one another, be more communal.
Yeah.
And those who have prepared, like we have, be ready to share and advocate for more people to non-violently, be reactive.
Yeah.
But we have to have this discussion.
This is what's so difficult, I think, about talking about this vision for human social organization, because we are representing this as though we're on the moral high ground, right? Individual life, liberty, property. But you're competing with communists, right, on the extreme other end, that are saying the same thing, right? It's even built into the term.
But they're really not. They're just lying.
I know, but even you say there, like, you want people to be more communal. They hijack that language and insert it straight into the term.
Correct.
Communist sounds better than individualist. This sounds selfish. And I think people just don't go a layer deeper than the word itself sometimes. And they just say, you know what? Communism sounds better to me. And that's a problem. Like, how do we, I don't know, invite people into the rabbit hole of deeper, more critical thinking to actually examine these isms with a more skeptical eye, such that they can get closer to truth rather than just latching onto the thing that sounds better.
I think it's pull them out of the rabbit hole of collusion, corruption, coercion, and bring them to the light, right? That was a very masterful, simplistic delineation between the two and how they've absconded with terms and definitions, right?
Yeah. Same with liberal, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Like, nomenclature doesn't matter. Principles
Action
matter and solutions matter. Like, that's why I really, as a younger man, like the so-called doomsday or economist guys, the end of the world, there's going to be crash this, crash that forever. They never provided largely solutions. And now we do have a solution. And it's not just theory. It's a 1.6 trillion all by itself, despite everything being against it, despite having choke point 3.0. And that should serve as a basis to continue to inspire and educate. You can't paint a picture of doom and get people to act.
Right.
Right. And that's why we want to identify our enemy, source what that enemy has done to harm us, and then find solutions and modes and methods to go at it and correct.
As you said earlier, the enemy is unsound money. The solution mode would
I'd be more specific. The enemy is central banks.
Central banking.
There is no unsound money without central banks.
That's right.